It's season 6 of Real Garage, and we've got some new things to play with. For starters, I got some new cameras. I'm trying to up my quality game. And I talked the wife into a new ArcDroid CNC plasma arm. I got to see one down at Mike Finnegan's, and I fell in love with the size and ease of use. So today, we're starting season 6 off with a project. I want to build a downdraft cutting table attachment that'll eat the smoke that's created while plasma cutting. My goal is to make this thing portable, yet easy to disassemble and store, since it won't be used for everyday fabrication. Which is a good excuse to get another folding ArcStation. I love these things, and I'll put a link in the description for the review I did on it. The ArcStation will be ground zero for this project, and everything attaches to it. So I scored a used mobile FILTAIR 130 a while back that I'll be using as my main sucking apparatus. If you're looking to evacuate your fumes out the side of a building, there are many simple fan options you could use instead. I'm making my basic table dimensions 28 by 20 inches. I'm using 1/8 inch thick 1x2 square tubing for this part. My first pieces will be 43 inches long with a 45-degree cut on one end. A 28-inch piece with 45-degree cuts on both ends, and then one 26-inch piece. As always, deburr your cut area. I'll be bolting this to the table with 6 3/8-inch fine thread bolts. So I cut some 1/8 inch wall 5/8 DOM tubing to 1 7/8 inches to use as the crush tubes. Using a carbide cutter or bimetal hole saw, drill 3 5/8-inch holes through the 1-inch side of the 43-inch long pieces at 4 inches, 16 inches, and 22 inches. Warning: read and follow all labels and your owner's manuals. I'm TIG welding the crush tubes in. I have my machine set for 100 amps, and I'm using 045 size ER70S2 filler metal. Note that I cut the tubes to 1 7/8 instead of 2 inches, so I have a 1/16 weld step on each side. This will give us extra weld strength when grinding the welds flush. I'm grinding all my weld joints, squaring up the sides, and tack welding it in place. I'm not welding it solid just yet. I've got my frame clamped to the bottom of the ArcStation, and double check that it's parallel to the table. This is critical because the plasma arm, when it stretches its arm out to its furthest point, has to maintain the proper standoff distance. Now let's transfer punch the mounting holes for drilling and tapping. I had to move the rear leg mounting bracket to drill the back holes. And I'm using a letter Q drill bit and a 3/8 by 24 fine tap. Bolt the frame back to the table. Double check that it's level and weld the outside and inside joints. I'm not welding the top or bottom seams. For the outside corners, I got the machine auto set for 14 gauge. But when I get to the inside corners, I'm gonna bump it up to 1/8 inch. For my cutting slat mounting tabs, I cut 16 1-inch by 1.5-inch pieces out of 1/8 inch flat stock. And then drilled a 1/4 inch mounting hole 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch from one end. For the 8 slats, I used 2-inch cold rolled 1/8 inch flat stock and cut them to 18 inches. And drilled a 5/16 hole 1 inch from either long edge and a 1/2 inch from each end. Bolt the slat tabs to the slats. They don't have to be super tight until after it's welded inside the frame. I started the first one at 2.5 inches, and then 3-inch spaced for the rest. I'm only putting 2 short welds on each tab to reduce the chances of warping the frame.
You notice I'm only putting 2 small welds on each one of the tabs, and I've clamped a couple pieces to the bottom of the frame to help me line up my slats. My goal is to keep them all the same height. Tighten up all of our bolts.
Perfect. So basically the table can be used as is, without anything to catch any fumes. So now let's make the smoke eater part. I'm using 063 thick 1x1 square tubing for the frame. Start by cutting 2 pieces 28 inches and 2 pieces 20 inches with 45 degrees at each end. This will be the top. Then straight cut 4 pieces 29.5 inches long, 4 pieces 26 inches long, and 2 at 18 inches. That's pretty good measuring after all that cutting. Got that much scrap left. This is all the tubing I need for the rest of this project. I'm gonna start with the top. Basically, I'm building it upside down. Square the top, clamp and weld the inside and outside corners. Again, I'm not welding the top or bottom at this time.
For these outside corners, I've got my machine turned down to the 18 gauge setting. But for the inside corners, I'll turn it back up to 16 gauge.
Then, grind the outside corner welds flush so the panels will fit tight. Now square up and tack weld the long 29.5 inch legs to the top of the inside corners. Trying to keep these all square will be a challenge and might need to be tweaked a bit during the rest of this process. Now take 2 of the 26-inch parts and tack them in place 24 inches outside the outside measurements from the top. Just tack what would be the bottom side. Do the same for the 2 18-inch pieces, rechecking for squareness along the way, and then finish weld the frame. My final check for squareness is just to make some diagonal measurements. They should be the same. That one's 29 3/4. And remember that I didn't weld these outside seams so my panels will fit tight. And with this kind of frame, you really don't need the extra strength anyway. Now I need to make the small parts catch screen. I'm using expanded metal that's about 0.70 thick. I cut it to 34 by 26 inches with my stomp shear, and using a cutoff wheel, I'm trimming 4 inches by 4 inches off each corner. And then bending it into a box frame. On the brake. Basket. Welding the basket in is pretty easy. All I did was pull the expanded metal over the sides of the 1x1, and I'm spot tacking them in place. I left my Multimatic 220 auto set for 16 gauge. Now I'll just go around and put a spot every couple inches. I'm going to skip around so I'm not putting all kinds of heat. On the square tubing. I don't want it to warp. I'm using 20 gauge steel for all my panels. Starting with a 20 by 28 inch bottom panel, cut 1 inch by 1 inch off the corners so it will fit inside the legs. I'm putting a step roll into all the panels. It's probably not necessary, but it does stiffen them up and it looks cool. Now clamp the panel to the underside of the square tubing and spot tack it in from the top side every couple of inches. I'm just putting spot tacks on the inside of here wherever the clamps are, because that's where it's tightest. I left my machine set for the 16 gauge setting. I'm just putting down a nice hot tack. For my side panels, I need 2 pieces 24 by 30 inches and 2 pieces 20 by 23.5. So I'm actually bolting my sides on. What? Yep, I might want to change the baffles up or add a water tray in the future, so I need the sides to be removable. For my longer panels, I bent about a 1-inch lip on each short side to overlap the panel next to it. It's definitely optional, but it saves me a bunch of screws and I think it looks cleaner. All right, I had a little snafu last night. I was about to weld on my leveler bolts to my legs when I realized that the legs of the folding ArcStation extend past the tabletop, which means that my legs are going to hit those legs. So basically what it means is I got to cut these off, make 2 new pieces that are 6.5 inches long, and re-weld them 2 1/4 inches further in from each side. Anyway, the PDF download plans on millerwelds.com/projects will have the updated instructions. Okay, now I can weld my leveler bolts in. I'm using 3/4 inch fine thread by 1 3/4 inch long bolts with a thin jam nut and a standard nut that is welded in the end of the 1x1 legs. I'm TIG welding mine, mostly fusing with the nut material, but I do have some 045 ER70S2 filler metal if I need it. Remember to grind the plating off your nuts. Always good advice. I'm mounting my wheels to the crossbar using these nut zerks. It's simple and easy. Just drilled a hole in my crossbar and use the insertion tool it's that simple. Now the wheels I got have a 1 inch 3/8 coarse thread stud on it. Makes it easy to mount them. My back crossbar was 26 inches, but since I had to move my legs in for clearance, this one's only 21.5 inches long. Depending upon what wheels you get will determine the position of the crossbar. I made mine so the top of the wheels will be about 32.5 inches from the cabinet top. The bottom of the cutting table is about 33 inches from the floor, and you need clearance to slide underneath it. For my exhaust port, I found a piece of tubing that has an inside diameter that is the same as the OD of my FILTAIR hose. I'm only using 4 inches of it. I'm actually using the cutting table to cut a hole in a 4.5 inch square piece that I'll weld halfway onto the tubing. Not bad for freehand. And then cut the same hole in the side of the cabinet, centered about 7.5 inches up from the top edge. Remember, I still have this thing upside down. Okay, the exhaust port's getting rivets. That way I could change something up in the future if I need to. Okay, cutting another hole for a clean out port. I got this on Amazon for like 12 bucks. They're used for like RVs and boats and stuff. This way, I can get in here and vacuum it out or pick out any small pieces. Alright, well, wasn't as good as the first one I did, but it fits. And if it fits, it ships. And we'll screw that in place. I think it's time for a test. Last thing I'm making is some guide plates. They're 1.5 inches by 2 inches, 1/8 inch flat stock. It'll make it easier to align the downdraft cabinet to the table. This is the reason I left the side panels 1/2 inch lower than the others. All right, another use for the stabilizer bolts are if you're cutting something super heavy and you feel like the table's gonna become out of balance, you can lift the downdraft cabinet up to the bottom of the cutting table and it'll support that additional weight. How about we give it a test? I think it works. Join me next time on Real Garage, where we do a real gear review on a new product. And Mike Finnegan's '55 Chevy Blasphemy, it's in the house for an upgrade.